So this time I wanted to talk about sub bass and how important it is to dance music. Right now you are hearing a sub bass with a kick drum, just one note, G, and it is slightly vibrating, and as you can hear it has this slight attack to it, pitch shift. You can do it in many sense. This one is massive, and here you can see envelope that modulates the frequency of the bass. So it would start with slightly higher frequency at the beginning that would sound like a thump. And it also has a LFO that slightly modulates the frequency, and you can increase it and decrease it. And here the rate, how strong it is. Here's the LFO and there's the rate knob. But of course the same principle can be applied to other synthesizers as well, where you just have a simple sine wave that is modulated by something. This gives the sub bass a thickness. Of course you need to be a bit careful, because the sub bass needs to be modulated just a little bit, not by a whole semitone. Here let's do this similar things in Serum. Right now we have a saw. We can quickly choose just a sine wave with this function, and to make things a bit more interesting, at the beginning we can make it thicker. So right here we can assign an LFO to the fine pitch parameter, change the rate, how fast it modulates it. And right now we are overdoing it. It's modulating the whole one semitone, so I'm reducing the size of it, of the modulation, the amplitude, to be more precise. And by changing the volume envelope I can take away that click that I have at the beginning of the sound. So right here in the Serum I can edit the formula that creates the sine wave. So I would get a sine wave that is one octave higher, and by adding the old sine wave I have a mixture of both of them. But it's slightly distorted as you can see, and now I introduce a lot more frequencies, but it's okay. And now I can do a spectral morphing. So now the sub bass is slightly richer. You can also distort the sub bass and make it a bit more interesting. Also, it is a good idea to check whether the sub bass is in mono, because it needs to be in mono. So in clubs and large venues like festivals, there is sound systems where there are separate dedicated speakers just for the lower frequencies, somewhere below 200 Hertz, and they all work mainly in mono. So to get the maximal volume from your sub bass, it needs to be in mono, because it will be sound in mono, and so that there wouldn't be any low frequency reverb in the venue that would interfere with itself and cancel out and make it a lot more unstable. So the sub bass needs to be in mono. Of course, if you are creating a track, you can have a wide stereo image in the breakdowns and other creative places, because it will sound amazing on headphones or in home, and it wouldn't be such a bad thing in live environment. But when it comes to the drops, to the places where you have the kick and the bass, the sub bass at full volume, it is advisable to have it in mono. And it is okay to keep your sub bass from the bass that you are producing. For example, if you're taking a very distorted bass sound and it has a subtone in it, you can emphasize it and keep it and not produce the sub bass separately, because then your sub will be in phase with all your sound. For example, if you're just taking a square the square will have the lower harmonic, the sub in it, but just together with this all bass it will sound louder because they are in phase. You can just take your sub bass and distort it into a square, and suddenly on the meter you will see that it takes less space frequency wise because it is distorted, but it is now richer in frequencies. Actually, there are many techniques and ways how you can create a sub bass. You can even create sub bass from a percussion sound just by pitching the low frequencies of a percussive sound, or you can take a sub bass, a sine wave, and just modulate its volume, make it vibrate, and you can create a sub bass that slides between notes. That is very popular, for example, in dubstep and other genres where you have a lot of space for bass lines and subs. So although the sub is very technical thing, you can still squeeze in some kind of a creativity in it. And so we can make a similar sub bass again with the Harmor. Here we are creating a simple pluck. And we can add a slight modulation. You see there is a vibrato effect. And here you can see how the vibrato effect affects harmonics, how they are moving. And here you can edit the volume of the harmonics individually. So I'm making a less sharp saw wave. I can even slightly change the waveform towards square wave from saw wave. It is also a good idea to cut the next frequency right after the sub, if you are creating the sub from a wave shape like a sawtooth or a square, because then you will feel the lower harmonic, the real sub, better. It will have less competition. And what you can also do is you can steal the sub bass from a kick drum, because the kick drum tail, the tail of the kick drum will probably work perfectly with itself, but you just need it to be pitched the right way so it actually hits the notes that you want to hit. So you can use something like Melodyne or New Tone, for example, that's inside of FL Studio, and pitch it. And here is another example where you can hear that the sub bass mainly is just the kick drum, and this RP kind of bass is just above the sub frequencies, which are usually around 50 hertz. And this sub again is made from Harmor. The same pluck is just slightly compressed, but it's the same parameters. There is introduced slight variation with the prism effect, and there is a slight phasing effect, but this is a frequency phaser, so it will make the partials move around. And to add some punch to the sub bass, I used a transient shaper from Isotope. A reverb that I'm not using didn't work out, and a really good distortion in the mid frequencies and the higher frequencies. There's also some harmonic excitement, which is again just distortion, very slight, and of course side chaining. And on master bus you can see how the frequencies work, where the real bass is around 100 Hz and the sub moves from 50 Hz down to 30. So that is basically it, but there is of course other more creative ways how to create sub basses. You can modulate the volume of them, you can make them move around, you can slide them so the frequency slides from one note to another, or the rate of modulation changes. There are all kinds of variations. The basic rules that still apply usually are that the kick and bass needs to work really well together. The sub needs to be in mono. And if you want to add some thickness to the sound, you can just modulate its frequency